The first time Marco touched my hand, we were arguing about a word. Not arguing, negotiating. That was what our sessions had become by the third week. Less language exchange, more extended negotiation between two people who had decided, without discussing it, that being right was less important than staying at the table longer. The word was attesa, Italian. He'd written it on a napkin and pushed it across the coffee shop table, and I looked it up and said it meant waiting, and he'd tilted his head in that specific way. He had a slow half tilt, like a question mark made physical, and said, "Not exactly." "Then what does it mean exactly?" I said. "It means," he stopped, picked up his pen, put it down. In Italian there is waiting and there is attesa. Waiting is when you're at a bus stop. Attesa is when you are, he paused, searching, suspended, waiting for something that matters, waiting that has feeling inside it. I looked at the word on the napkin. "We don't have that in English," I said. "I know," he said. "I noticed." Then he took my hand and turned it palm up on the table and traced the word into my skin. Letter by letter, slowly. Watch in my face. Instead of my hand, a TTSA, his finger moving like he was writing. Something he wanted me to keep. I forgot to learn the word. I was too busy feeling it. His name was Marco Ferretti, and he had arrived in Chicago 6 months ago for a 2-year architecture fellowship, and he spoke English the way someone plays an instrument they learned as an adult, technically proficient, occasionally brilliant, sometimes reaching for a note that wasn't quite there. He'd found the language exchange program because he said his English was too formal, too textbook. He wanted to learn how people actually spoke. I was paired with him because I was learning Italian for reasons I described as practical. I had a trip planned. I had always meant to, and which were actually more about needing something new to put my attention into after a year that had emptied me out in ways I was still cataloging. We met at the same coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday. I taught him idioms. He taught me vocabulary. We corrected each other's grammar with the gentle ruthlessness of people who had established early on that being babied was not what either of us needed. By week 2, I knew his coffee order, and he knew mine. By week 3, the sessions ran an hour over without either of us noticing until the coffee shop staff started putting chairs on tables around us. The thing about learning a language with someone is that failure is constant and public, and there is nothing to do but laugh at yourself and try again. We laughed a lot. His laugh was reluctant, like it surprised him each time, and then full. Once it arrived, the kind of laugh that took over his whole face. I found myself working for it, setting up small jokes in halting Italian, watching him try to hold it together while I mangled his language, feeling unreasonably pleased when the laugh finally broke through. He was careful with my Italian, patient in a way that didn't feel like patience, felt like genuine interest in watching me find the word, like he wanted to see me get there myself rather than hand me the answer. When I got something right, he didn't make a big thing of it. He just nodded and said, "Esatto, exactly," in a tone that made it feel like something. One Thursday in October, we left the coffee shop. When they closed and walked without discussing it, pointing at things, naming them in both languages. Lampion, streetlight, marciapede, sidewalk, cielo, sky. The city remaking itself into something new in my mouth. His hand gesturing toward each thing he named, my hand gesturing back. At some point our hands stopped gesturing and were just together, his fingers between mine, unhurried, like it had been happening for weeks and we were only now noticing. We kept walking. Neither of us named it. There was an evening in week 5 where we were working through a piece of writing, a letter, something he was drafting to send home to his mother. And he was struggling with a particular English phrase, and I was leaning across the table to look at his notebook, and he turned at the same moment, and we were suddenly very close. His face and my face, the coffee shop noise receding. He didn't move back. How do you say, he stopped. His eyes moved over my face in the way they moved over new vocabulary slow. Particular, trying to understand the thing fully before naming it. How do you say when you are far from home, but the far does not feel entirely bad? Because of something new. I stayed very still. We say, I thought about it honestly, we say something feels like home, or somewhere new starts to feel like home. Anisia assembrir casa, he said quietly, starts to feel like home. His eyes still on mine. Yeah, I said, that. He looked at me for a moment longer, and then looked back at his notebook and wrote something down, and I sat back in my chair and picked up my coffee. And my hand was not entirely steady. The evening it changed was a Thursday in November, cold enough that we'd both kept our coats on inside, sitting closer than usual because the coffee shop was crowded, and we'd taken a small corner table that required it. We'd been there 2 hours. He was teaching me a phrase that didn't translate, Colatino, the ring a wet glass leaves on a table, which Italian has a word for because Italian has words for things other languages haven't bothered to name. I was delighted by this, and he was delighted by my delight. And we were leaning over the table with our heads close, him writing words on a napkin, me reading them back in pronunciation he gently corrected. Colatino, I said. Almost. The C is harder. C-U lack C I know. Colatino. Yes. He smiled. Iseto. I looked up and found his face, very close to mine, and neither of us corrected the distance. His pen was still on the napkin. My hand was near his on the table. Marco, I said. Mia, he said, short for my name. Sophia, he'd started doing that somewhere. Around week 2, and I'd never asked him to stop. I don't actually have a trip planned, I said, to Italy. I never did. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. I also did not need help with my English. I looked at him. Your English is perfect. Yes, he said, it is. I laughed before I could stop it. A real one. Sudden and helpless, and he laughed too. His reluctant, then full laugh. Both of us sitting in the corner of a crowded coffee shop laughing at the elaborate, accidental honesty of it. And when it settled, he was looking at me with something open and certain in his expression. His hand turned on the table and covered mine. Outside, Chicago was doing its November thing. Wind off the lake, sky the color of pewter, people moving fast with their heads down. Inside, the coffee shop was warm and loud, and his thumb was tracing a slow line across my knuckles, and I thought about Atessa, waiting that has feeling inside it, and thought that maybe that was what the last 5 weeks had been. There is a word, he said, for when you realize something was already true for a long time before you said it. What's the word? He paused. I don't know it in Italian either. He looked at me. Maybe it is a new word. I turned my hand over under his. Tell me when you figure it out, I said. I'll help you translate it. His fingers laced through mine on the table. Outside, the wind. Inside, his hand warm in mine, and 5 weeks of Tuesdays and Thursdays, suddenly rearranging themselves into something with a shape I recognized. Atessa, I thought. And then the waiting was over.